Greetings, everyone. On behalf of our corporate host, Paradox.ai, and the worldwide membership of TA Tech, the Association for Talent Acquisition Solutions, I'd like to welcome you to this Leadership Summit on Artificial Intelligence and Machine Learning in Talent Acquisition. Next slide, please. Now, before we begin, I'd like to just talk for a second about what we mean by a leadership summit. Unlike conventional conferences where you cover a whole range of topics, our leadership summits do a deep dive into a specific technology. We want to explore the best practices, the opportunities, and the challenges involved in acquiring, developing, and implementing some of the world's best talent technology. And in order to do that, what we do is bring together world-class speakers. And we've got a faculty today that's just second to none. And we really get into some of the most important topics related to talent acquisition with artificial intelligence and machine learning. Now, if we were doing this event in person, the other aspect of our leadership summits that make them so special is that they are intimate settings where senior level people can get together and really have a meaningful dialogue about the issues and opportunities related to the technology. Obviously, we can't do that in today's environment, but what we can do is ask you to participate. Please post your questions using the Q&A tab at the bottom of the screen and let us know what you'd like to hear our speakers talk about. Let us know your questions. Let us have your comments and thoughts so that we can really make this as interactive as possible. I'd like to thank our corporate host again for today's session, Paradox.ai, and our two sponsoring organizations. You'll hear from all three of them later. Our sponsors are HireClicks and Olio. Next slide, please. I'd also like to propose that we have a little fun today. This is a conference about artificial intelligence. So what we've done is put together an artificial trivia contest. We're going to ask a trivia question about artificial intelligence at the beginning of each 10-minute intermission between each of the sessions. And for the one or more people who get all 5 correct answers, so there will be 5 questions again at the beginning of each intermission throughout the day. The person who gets the answers to all 5 correct is going to get a really cool prize. So stay with us for the entire day. We're going to cover a lot of important content, and you have the opportunity to win a prize if you can win the trivia contest. Finally, I'd like to just tell you a little bit about TA Tech. We are the trade association, the trade organization for the talent technology industry. Our members come from all over the world and cover every aspect of talent technology. We host an array of conferences and leadership summits. Our conferences are really B2B kinds of meetings for businesses to do business with each other. But we also co-locate them with leading HR organizations and conferences. So for this year, the TA Tech North America Conference, which is a B2B conference, will be held in conjunction with the SHRM Talent Management Conference, which is at least currently scheduled to be held on April 19 to 21. Our leadership summits, which we hold throughout the year, cover AI and machine learning, today's topic, programmatic ad buying and talent acquisition, recruitment marketing, and technology, diversity, and compliance. Now, as I mentioned earlier, typically these would be in-person events, but given the uncertainty around the world in which we live today, what we are doing is planning digital events in Q1 and Q2 of this year, and we're going to wait and see what we can do, if anything, hopefully we can, in person in Q3 and Q4. In addition, we produce a bi-weekly webinar series. It's called TA Tech Live. It's all about introducing talent technology to smart recruiters. And on January 27th, our next session, we have a very interesting topic, how to pick a programmatic ad platform. And on February 9th, we have a fireside chat with Aaron Ain, the CEO of UKG, which is the mashup of Kronos and Ultimate Software, which took place last year. In addition, TA Tech sponsors industry definitions and standards. A lot of companies, for example, are moving to pay for performance, and that means they pay per click. But the question is, what is a legitimate click and how are they counted? So what we've done is create what we call a traffic quality declaration, where job boards, social media sites, aggregators, and other publishers online can tell advertisers, can tell employers exactly how those clicks are being counted, and create the kind of transparency that builds trust in online recruitment advertising. And finally, launched this past year, we've introduced the 100 Most Influential Talent Acquisition Thought Leaders program. We want to really shine a spotlight on the corporate and HR folks who are the corporate and industry folks who are really setting the pace for the development and implementation of state-of-the-art talent technology. There are all kinds of programs that provide some visibility to HR thought leaders, and that's fine. We want to shine a spotlight on the people in talent acquisition who are really leading the pack, if you will, in terms of innovation and new ideas. We do this in seasonal classes. So we have announced the fall class and the winter class for this year's selectees, and we will be introducing the spring and summer classes as we go forward. 25 people in each class, a total of 100, and then we'll start all over again because there's certainly a lot of great thought leadership that deserves to be recognized in this space. Okay, enough from me. Let's get started on our conference today. I'm very pleased to introduce the next session. The tech is not the goal. Digital transformation lessons from the Fortune 500. We have two truly special discussants for this particular session. Athena Karp is the founder and CEO of HiredScore, and Melissa Katz is the director for talent acquisition technology and programs at AbbVie. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to them.
Wonderful. Hi, everyone. Hope you can hear us. Melissa, it's great to have you. Thank you, Peter, for giving us the chance to join such an exciting conference and discussion. Always grateful for the thought leadership that TA Tech puts out there and for all the attendees today. So I will more formally introduce Melissa, who is the Director of Talent Acquisition Technologies and Programs at AbbVie. She's responsible for building out global TA processes along with implementing the technology innovation roadmap for TA. She also manages the PMO office with a team of project managers leading all of that TA-related projects for the org. Melissa, whom I've been grateful to have known throughout all the different companies where she's led such functions, AIG, Moody's, and Unilever, including ATS and next-gen technology integrations. In her spare time, you can find her on her Peloton. So thank you for joining us today. It's a pleasure. And would be great, Melissa, if you could maybe kick off aligned with this goal of the technology is not the goal, and digital transformation lessons require all these different elements and components to ensure success, which I think is a topic not enough leaders are aware of, or those that aren't 3 or 4 companies into trying to lead and bring this change about might not have that awareness. If you could maybe just kick off with a kind of overview of what those transformations have been you've led at AbbVie and elsewhere, and give everyone context of that type of tech we'll be talking about today.
Right. So thank you again, Athena. Always love joining you for these things. We've known each other for quite some time, and I think it's been interesting over the years just to see, it used to be just putting on it maybe an ATS and redoing an ATS to where we are today, where you're adding in, companies like HiredScore, Paradox, where you're doing the AI and scheduling and things like that. And it's changed so much over the years. So just some context, I recently joined AbbVie. I don't know how many people know, but Allergan was recently merged with AbbVie. And it was really an exciting time for me to come in and take over this new team that the AbbVie leadership group has seen. Really, it's really a new space in TA, is just this need for some folks to come in more on the project management side and really start looking at your process and your tech stack and everything that goes into TA. And I think that's why I've been in TA for so many years, is the ability that the tech keeps growing and changing. And many years ago when I started in Monster was like the newest thing to where we are today, to just adding on all these technologies. So what I was kind of tasked with doing when we merged the two organizations together is really get us all in one ATS, because the ATS is really that foundation and that backbone, and really look at, again, not just what is the tech that we need, but what is that overall process, and what is that overall foundation, so that the tech is enables us to really become more talent advisors. And that's really the road that we've been on in the journey in AbbVie. We're starting with merging everybody into our one Taleo system. And then we've had HiredScore for AbbVie, but it'll be new to our Allergan folks. And then we are going to roll it out globally. So if anyone has attended our talks before, I'm very big on waves of things. And that is because of lessons learned at other places where we kind of saw the big picture and wanted to do all this fun stuff. And really ran into a lot of obstacles because it was just too big and it was too much and it wasn't really right for the team at the time. So that's really, I think everywhere I go, I keep learning a new lesson on how you build these better and better. And I think every time I go somewhere new, I get to almost try it again, take my lessons learned and kind of do it better the next time. And that's really what I've been doing. So when I started at AIG and Moody's, it was really just building out process and ATS to Unilever, where obviously everyone knows Unilever is kind of the great gold standard of great technology and great process, to kind of coming over to AbbVie and really transforming our team. And the team is really excited. But there's pain. There's a lot of pain when we do any of these processes as well.
Yeah, it's fascinating, Melissa. I think how you've had more highly regulated or, constrained, or maybe lower on the innovation index, to higher on certain types of innovation, and back to highly regulated, right, if you will, different companies and waves. I think if you can talk a little bit more for this group about exactly our topic, beyond the tech, what are those biggest gaps you see? How would you categorize them? I know people talk a lot about change management, but maybe even in mentioning that, what that's meant on the ground for you as being responsible for this transformation, and thus needing to pick up all these other items to make sure it's a success.
Yeah, and I think that's the biggest thing. It's very easy to come in and say, oh, I like all this new technology, I want it to do these things. But I think with TA, the big thing is we have so many different audiences that you have to almost think about each audience, and it's not a one size fits all change management plan. It's not a one size fits all training plan. And even the most basic things, and I'll use something that we're doing right now at AbbVie, is we're trying to get our hiring managers to do a little more self-service and start the rec process in Taleo. And even that, which to us, we'd be like, oh, it's no big deal, fill out the form. It's a lot of different, what does that audience look like and what does that training look like? So I think really it is, before anybody gets into any of these, we're going to change things and make it bigger and better. It's really knowing your organization and knowing who you need to partner with from the get-go to make sure there's alignment. So there's our HR business partners. It could be legal, it could be compliance, even your business. Obviously, the business is going to be affected by some of these changes, especially as you add things like I just said, some self-service, or the way you're going to be sharing resumes and things like that. So making sure you really are taking stock of what the organization looks like, and getting people from those areas to buy in as you start to build. Because the last thing, and I've seen it in other places, we kind of dropped it on folks right as we were about to launch it, 2 weeks before, no training, minimal communications. And we've seen a big fallout that people are confused. They don't know what's happening. It feels like more work for them. So I think that's the biggest thing that I've learned, is really just building a really good foundational process and making sure all your key stakeholders are involved as much as possible in the conversation as you're building. Because again, you get more buy-in when you're ready to launch. People are like, I know what's coming. I know how it's going to happen. And again, we all know TA, I need our friends in BHR and I need our hiring managers to work with us to make that candidate experience even better. And that's another piece too. I think that's the one area in HR that maybe not other groups work with besides TA, is the external marketplace. So getting that right, so that external marketplace is a good experience and people are obviously talking about it. I think that's just the alignment that we're trying to get with all of these partners. And again, the technology is great. The technology can do wonderful things. Sometimes it's harder to get all the process and the pieces aligned so that the technology is a success.
I think it's such an important and powerful point of this. We'll talk more about best practices in training recruiters and training sourcers on these next gen tech, because I think you've developed just a canon of great methods that work and probably a graveyard of the methods that don't work. But just focusing on that manager buy-in, maybe with a specific example would be great of how that stakeholder aware of the why behind this change can accelerate the outcomes and ensure the ROI, or maybe not aware or sticking to old methods of, I want to see everyone, or I want to screen myself, tactics, why that can actually hinder the objectives. And I think we often put that recruiter in a really sticky place where they're managing up to maybe a department head or a leader in saying, no, this is our new process, and they might not feel that level of comfort. So maybe if you can just give an example like that, and kind of what have you seen manager education or other stakeholders in the org who can prepare that manager for that change in advance of a transformation that you're running?
Yeah, and I think a lot of it is really partnering with your TA leadership team, who goes to, again, your HRBP meetings or your business meetings with more senior leadership that can help trickle it down. Honestly, at the end of the day, what's always worked well is data, and making sure you know what the pain points are of that business. And it isn't, sometimes, I hate to say, it's like a resume. It's not going to be one size fits all for all the business of the org. And what I've seen is, we know, especially when everyone should, you know your business, you know what their pain points are. Let's say they complain about the speed at which you hire, or not enough folks in the marketplace. So really kind of knowing what the kind of overall themes are of the business of why they can be unhappy with TA, and making sure you have what your current data is to what that data could be. Because at the end of the day, the data of what could be is also going to turn into your SLAs and your goals for your recruiters. And again, it's also knowing your team. So if I know that my team has 50 recs on their plate at all times, I'm not going to put some huge pie in the sky SLA goals. And it's also stuff I'm not going to promise as we start to implement the technology. We're going to make sure we know what we can do, we know what we're capable of, and that's the stuff that we're going to sell to the business. But honestly, what I've seen the business buy-in is all with data. It's, what are we going to do? How is it going to help me? What is it going to do for me? It's kind of a, what's in it? What do they call it? Whiffum, I think they call it. But it's a, what's in it for me? Why should I buy into this? And when you're starting to show them that scheduling times can go down, I have, you have better market, access to, by using certain things. That's usually why. But again, it's also promising that stuff up front and making sure you can measure it, so that when the technology is on, 1 month, 6 months, and a year, you're able to show how is it getting better with time. I think that's been the biggest success with us. And that's what I've learned the best, is just the best way for buy-in is just what's in it for me.
Yeah, no, I love the what's in it for me, and especially in advance of a program launching. I think a question maybe some in the audience might have about that is, how do you explain that, and kind of what's best practices so that it's not recruiter speak or talent acquisition speak versus business speak? Do you have a partner helping you translate? Is that on the people like you to be able to speak the language of recruitment and speak the language of business? Maybe a little bit more about that.
Yeah, and I think it's really on your leadership team. I think I trust my leadership team. They are sitting with the BHRs and the hiring managers, and I'm hoping that they're in that position because they can, to your point, they can speak both. So they understand what the business wants, and they can come back and say, this is what we need. But I'm also hoping that they can go back and say, here's why this isn't, you're not getting your candidates because you want to see every resume. We're not moving this needle forward because you're looking for that purple squirrel, and here's some things that we can do. I think the other thing is training your recruiters how to advise versus just taking that job description and posting whatever's up there, but really having conversations with them and saying, you're asking for a lot of this, maybe we can, if we took it down a couple of years, or we did this, here's how it can go faster. So I think it's also some basic training on the recruiters on how do you shift that mindset from just doing whatever the managers ask you to, but sometimes that's not easy. So making sure you also have your TA leadership team who's pushing that agenda, as well as your BHR is helping you as well. Because if the BHR is calling you and saying, just send John Smith all those resumes, just do what he wants, it's never going to work.
Yeah. So Melissa, I'm thinking a lot about anyone listening in from here in the TA tech space who hasn't maybe had the benefit of doing this at 4 world-class companies, rinse, repeat, iterate. Where do you go for guidebooks, frameworks, best practices? Kind of what are your aids in helping drive these transformations? And I think also educate up and educate down and educate everywhere in between in what are the common pitfalls and what will prepare for the success.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, it's just the strength of your network. I have great people like my HiredScore friends who I can say, what is this? Have you heard of this? Just really being able to get involved in, local like organizations and folks that, and just former peers. I like kind of seeing too, I've worked with some really great people who've gone on to other organizations, and I will tap them and say, hey, all right, you're over there now. What are you guys using? What are you doing? So I think it's having a really good network, keeping in touch with those folks, obviously attending things like conferences when you can, but sometimes it's just off the cuff. Hey, we're thinking about this, who uses them and what do you know? And it's really just, again, using your network and building that strong network to make sure that you have some folks to tap on the shoulder when you're starting to look at things. And being involved. And I know that's so hard these days. I know everyone's working from home and the kids are home and everything else is going on, but really trying to figure out who are those go-to folks and where are those kind of networks you can tap into when you're ready and you basically just have questions on how things work. And it's information overload these days. I think everybody has their set ways of doing things. And I think that's another watch out that I will say, we might get to this later, but even with you, when you talk to your network and what works for people, sometimes ask for other questions, because I think we all know, and especially, I've been at a lot of different organizations, every organization's TA function is set up so differently. So even though what one works for one organization might not work for the other, because your setup is different. Your rec loads might not be the same. You might have a sourcing team, or you might not have a sourcing team, or you have an admin team. So I think, again, when you are, kind of interviewing your network for certain things and just want to know what best practices, start asking those foundational questions of, what does your TA, before I ask you which technology do you like, how are you set up and what are you doing and what are you doing with that technology and who uses it? Because again, what works for some might not work for others just because of setup.
Yeah, it's a great point. And maybe if you can share a little bit more in all the orgs, the challenges universally that you've seen versus, at some orgs that exist and some org that doesn't, of helping that recruiting function be the talent advisory, talent consulting function that everyone dreams of. There's enabling them with the investment and the toolkit to position them for success. But as this keynote is about, there's all the other. And so maybe you can share some of that specific best practices around training, around education, around metrics that enable that to be successful.
Yeah, and I think, listen, there's no magic bullet. I have to say, this is company number 3 that I've been doing this with, like on a bigger scale. And a lot of it's hard because you can't predict what's coming in. And I think, the number one thing that I've realized after doing this once, kind of one or two times is, and I've warned our leadership teams about it, is really just making sure that you're putting, again, back to those attainable, know your team, know your function, know your business, you know what workload looks like. So putting in attainable goals, but also don't put tech stacks in with that hope that it's just going to decrease headcount in day one, because over time it might, but sometimes what I've also seen is you almost need to beef up, get it going, and then kind of decide where you want to go as well. And sometimes that might be a decrease in headcount once it's working, but it also might be, oh, look, maybe we need a sourcing team because we really have a good, between our CRM and some of our AIs and those types of things, we can do more sourcing now, or whatever that looks like, or you need, more admin or whatever that looks like. So I think for me, we've tried to do as best as we can, and what we have are kind of what we can control was basically what I've done. So what we've done is, put in things like new recruiter university. I think it's so important that everybody who comes in, whether they're contract, full-time, RPO, whatever you have going on, everybody's trained in the same way, is all their SLAs and goals. It shouldn't be, I've been in, you manage RPOs before, your RPO shouldn't have any different goals than your recruiters. Manage everybody the same so it feels the same, and train them the same. So we've built new recruiter universities, and that's had obviously all of our trainings for all of the systems. Everyone should have access to the same systems when possible, and really making sure that everybody going in is handling their intakes the same way. Maybe their phone screens, everyone's, has that same goal of, get to a short list. Don't just, toss resumes over the fence. So we've done a lot of that. We've also done, people don't want to sit through 4 hours, 8 hours of training. We've made bite-sized videos, we've made reference guides. So really trying to keep in mind is, what is all the tailoring that people want to do? And I just need to know how to do an offer right now. I don't want to listen to an 8-hour training video. I'm going to just go pull up that offer video. And then we've expanded it to things like lunch and learns, and whether, obviously we know we don't have the funding to send everybody to, to get licensed or, credits or all these conferences, but we do some sharing. So whether it's a database of all the different sources, places people can go to, we started some lunch and learns where some of kind of our folks who really are, they love that sourcing piece, they love doing those things, we'll let them host and they lead those lunch and learns. So the recruiters are hearing it not from me or a leadership who's just flipping through some slides, it's actually from one of their peers. So we're trying to get them upgraded. I think it's also knowing your team. Who are your folks that are very comfortable just kind of being transactional and doing that, and who are the folks who love going and talking to the business and arming them with the tools that they can to go and have those conversations. I think the hard thing is sometimes without a good workforce planning, we just don't know people's rec loads at every given time. So it's also understanding that people can't be sourcing and recruiting when they have 40 or 50 recs on their plate. So again, making sure their goals are attainable, that they feel like they can achieve them, and it's a little bit of a stretch as well.
Yeah, the bite-sized training, especially, and meeting recruiters at the points of needs, I think maybe that's an eye-opener for audiences listening in. Of there's the old way of implementing big, heavy, end-to-end systems, and do we use some of those best practices, but not all of them, for implementing agile value add applications or tools like a HiredScore, like a Paradox, like a HireView, other add-ons. So maybe you can talk a little bit more about, Melissa, just some of the differences you see. That's yet another stakeholder, which is the IT org, and probably even managers that want people to go through that half-day training. What you found in trying to delineate, there's some tools that need these things and some tools that don't. How do you categorize that?
Yeah, and I think it's actually interesting. I think back a couple of years ago, everybody wanted this 4-hour, 5-hour trainings, and basically what we saw at the end of it is half the time we would have to retrain folks, because we all know if I'm sitting on, 20 new recs. I'm not getting to offer for at least another 4 weeks. And then I go, how did they do that offer? And we were getting, phone calls to retrain folks at that point of need. So I think people like it. And actually what we heard, which was really interesting this time, is people didn't want big trainings. I think we're almost at that point that everyone's so busy now. Everyone's like, oh my God, we can't put 4-hour trainings on the team. So what we've done too is made sure that we, in certain points, an ATS, I think an ATS is a good example. An ATS, you probably still need to do some type of 4-hour training. We all know everyone's not paying attention, especially everyone's home at this point. We at least used to be face-to-face. I can see you in a room falling asleep versus now you're probably on your computer writing an email. But we know everyone's not paying attention. But what we actually did it for is, because like I said, we just moved everybody into one zone of Taleo. We did it. They were long trainings. Some people asked questions, some people paid attention. We knew not everybody did, but we recorded it. That goes into our bucket. And then we made those bite-sized videos off of there. Now things like HiredScore, we just launched with you all, is that Avature integration with, now we've had Fetch and we've done it. Avature integration, people were kind of like, oh, is it, are we doing a little bit more? Is it going to affect our candidate pools that we already have? And I think it was really getting them to realize it's really not a big change, but we can kind of slot it into other trainings. And again, we've done a lot of work with making quick reference guides. So when someone's ready and it makes them feel a little bit more comfortable, sometimes just seeing that reference guides, especially makes that senior leader feel comfortable that, all right, people know what they're doing when they start touching the system. And I didn't need to have a 2-hour training on something so basic. So I think it's really knowing your audience. And then even if, even if some folks want maybe more of a training, if it's more simple, again, bite-sized videos, reference guides, usually that keeps people at ease. And what I've seen too, especially on like the business side, none of them want to go to training. So what we've done too, same thing, we've offered it, it's optional if they came, but we recorded it. And what we did is made sure that all the recruiters had an email template that says, hey, you're opening a rec, here you go. And it became material that the recruiters could easily send out to the hiring managers. They didn't have to train them. We didn't have to train them. They were able to either look at a reference guide or watch a video, whatever they liked. So making a repository too of just email templates the recruiters can use or reference guides that they can send out, whether it's to hiring managers or candidates, because we started doing it to candidates as well for their help on pre-onboarding and those types of things. We've made a really large repository that is going to kind of help the recruiters build better relationships with the business, with the candidates, and help them out, but made it easy for them to help them out at the same time.
Yeah, and I think it also goes to the scalability of the transformation as your team grows, as you add new recruiters, new sourcers. Often what we found, not working with you, but working with others, is that training plan and that onboarding is really built for a organizational first launch, go live. But it might not also have the training of the continuity. You talk about sometimes some users need a reboot or a re-education, right, of that platform and program at the right points in time. And then organizations are constantly losing people and adding new people. So how do you kind of build that end to end? I don't know if that's something you all have been sharing.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, and I think that's the big thing. And again, there's where your data lies, because I think we've noticed it. With HiredScore, we see how the numbers are. People aren't adapting. They're still in Taleo. It kind of causes an alarm that says maybe everyone needs a little bit of a refresher on how to use this. Or at one time, folks, maybe you're adding a whole bunch of new users to a system and you want to do kind of a refresh. And I think it's really good because those refreshes, we open them up to everybody. And then we record them. All those recordings go into that repository. So when that one new person starts, we're not calling up our vendors or calling on someone on the team to actually redo all those trainings. It's almost like a nice little book that'll say, on day, and we have it all written out on, that first week, day 1, they should watch the Taleo videos on, by day 5, they should be on our HiredScore videos or our Avature videos or whatever that is, or whatever those trainings are. Again, so we've built it so it's not a lot of work too on the folks, because we all know when people start, recruiters don't have time to sit and train the new recruiter and walk through step by step. It gives the recruiter, whoever is mentoring them or kind of training them, time to say, here, go watch these videos. I got to go do some meetings. I'll come back and we'll sit down and talk about what you need. And that's been really sustainable. And I think it's worked really well for our team. And we're, again, constantly building it. I think the big watch out there though is you have to put someone in charge of making sure that they keep it updated, because we've built, when we joined AbbVie, we had separate training manuals for each side of the fence, and now that we've kind of rebuilt this one zone, we have to refresh all of our training manuals because they all don't make sense because we've fixed things. So I think it's making sure that once it's not a build new recruiter university or build that SharePoint with all that information and leave it, making sure that people are there to check it out, refresh it, make new videos, take out videos, and upgrade, I think is really important too, or it's a lot of work for nothing.
So Melissa, there's amazing insights in training, best practices, education, upskilling. There's often a quote from you, which is, don't, train it or leave it, right? So how do you think about, after those steps and best practices, the ongoing monitoring, the scorecards, the adoption engagement, and the understanding you as the transformation leader need to actually reinforce and ensure that adoption and engagement?
Yeah, and I think the big thing is all in the recruiter goals. Again, I think it's, as you're building, knowing your team, knowing your process, knowing, again, what is reality too, is making everybody send a short list of 3 to 5 people in 10 days when there's hiring managers that are still out there who want every resume. Maybe that's not an ideal goal for your organization. But really, again, starting as you build what those deliverables will be, build that SLA and figure out how you're going to measure it too. Because I think that's another big thing. We kind of say, oh, look, I'll measure all these things, but how are you actually capturing that data to build? And we've built dashboards to kind of show, all right, in the funnel, here's the things that we're looking at by recruiter and kind of the main metrics that they have to hit. Again, doesn't have to be 10 of them. It could be 3 of them, especially if you're starting out new and they're not used to it. I think the big thing is tie it to their goals, because when you give them something to work towards, or they know, in my one-on-ones with my manager, we're going to talk why my agencies are now above, 6%, or why I can't, why it's taking me from, intake to interview, why it's taking me 15 days or whatever that looks like. And you can have those conversations. And I think with that too, especially leadership should be looking at those and kind of say, all right, look at everyone's struggling in one area. Here's time to maybe, to kind of reboot and say, all right, what's going on, guys? Let's have maybe a training. Is there something we need to do? Is there something that's happening? So that data can tell you that story right then and there to say, don't wait till it becomes a problem. It'll tell, that's where we can say, all right, let's have a lunch and learn. People are really struggling with sourcing, diversity, whatever that looks like, and getting those things in there. But it's all tied to their goals. And it's also showing, as like a leadership team, we are invested in you. Actually, we're not setting these goals and hoping that you fail, but we really want you to attain them. And we're going to give you all of that, opportunity to do so. So I think it's all about that data. As you're building the system, the next biggest thing to make sure that you're doing is, how are you truly measuring it? And is it sustainable? Is that data, if you're not hard coding your source should not be a data point. Because if you're letting your candidates pick source, we all know that's not going to be an accurate thing. So I think it's really making sure that you can, you pick those data points that you can easily measure and you can see, and build it into the data that you're going to monitor once the systems kick off.
Yeah. And connected question is, how aware are those stakeholders using this toolkit about the change that's coming, about the role in 2021 they'll need to play for the org? How do you kind of do the heart and mind education and shifting so that all of these other pieces fall into place?
Yeah, and I think it's again, especially as we enter a new year, it's starting those conversations right off the bat as you start your, what are we achieving this year? What is happening? Because I think you're doing it individually in your own individual goals. I also think your leadership teams are going out and talking about, all right, what are we going to do this year? What are our goals? What do we have to do? And it's a great way to start tying in, all right, we're going to keep agencies down this year. We were at, I don't know, I'm making these numbers up, it was not us, but we're at 20% in it last year. We've just kind of, said, let's look at all of our agencies, get them on one MSA with standard terms. And now we're going to make sure that our teams, knowing that we're giving them new tools, they should be at X amount of agency spend. So don't, business, we're going to pressure you a little bit before we just call an agency. So I think now is a great time of year, but even anytime you're doing, especially it becomes also too, let's say you do something in June, if it's part of your change management. So as you talk to your business, as you talk to HRBPs, it rolls into that conversation of change management is as we roll this out, this is what we're measuring, this is our goals, and then we'll continue to report it out to you as they go to, we all know they go to quarterly meetings and those types of things, and we arm our leadership team with those things.
Yeah, so that kicking off the year, the advanced understanding of the change in role and then the why behind all this toolkit, I think those are
and there's no surprises. So especially with your recruiting team, these are part of your goals. It's all baked in. And again, I think for me, I just get nervous is just making sure truly before you make something a goal, make sure you can truly measure it so that they feel like, they can achieve that at the end of the day.
And talk a little bit more. I know that COVID has impacted, a lot of obviously organizations, TA teams in busyness, in new things they have to handle that they've never handled before. And I guess also companies have thought a lot about, is now the right time to do a transformation? Should we wait until we're all back in office and in person and things die down? Is that going to be a 1-year wait, a 3-year wait? What metrics and goals will that wait then negatively impact? So I think if you can just talk a little bit more as someone who's been actually leading not just a merger of large global companies, but also a transformation simultaneously from remote in COVID situation, if you can talk a little bit more about how to calibrate those decisions and maybe what COVID has accelerated in some places.
Yeah, and I mean, I think, coming from, some organizations that were very truly fluid and, kind of open to whether it was work from home or, work from anywhere type of kind of industry to industries that are very like everyone needs to be in the office. And this is how, we can only get work done if we're live and in spots. And I think it's been interesting to see even places like that kind of realizing that, I think everyone does I think, especially as we're almost going into year 1 of this fully, which I keep looking, I'm like, oh, March 13th was the date that we all went into lockdown. And I can't believe, I remember thinking it was only going to be a week or 2. And here we are almost 10 months later. But I think it's really funny to me of all the things that I'm sure everybody on here who's been in TA for a while has been saying, things like, and organizations, I mean, Unilever is one of them where they do it great, where we were using, Pymetrics and HireVue and all these things kind of remote before, and really trying to get that pool down before, before they kind of came in. And I think everyone's starting to see the value of, we didn't need 95 people to come in, because they didn't have an option. There was no option to come in anymore. You had to use video. And I laugh when I do hear hiring managers that I know love to have people come in for 25 rounds and, seeing everybody possible. And let's just see if we can see a couple more, and saying, oh, the process goes a lot faster with these videos. So I think what people are noticing is that work can get done, especially in someone in my area where we're doing projects where we're so used to, and me and you have attended a lot of them where we had to all come together and we all had to sit in the same place and we had to workshop. And I miss those times, but I think we've also realized that we can all get on Zoom for 2 hours, put our cameras on and do the same type of work. So I think what we've seen is that there are better ways that we could do things that at the end of the day are speeding up, the process and the way things are doing. I think the big thing there too, again, is change management. What is that at the end of the day? What is the buy-in that once we actually, hopefully, knock on wood, soon go back to real life, what is the balance that we want to achieve and you're going to have some organizations that love it and it's going to be 100% and they're going to kind of almost stay in this. You're going to have organizations that want to do a hybrid of both. And I think that's the next step is we have some buy-in now. People aren't as afraid or as against it as they used to be. But I think it's now as an organization, what does everybody want? What is that goal of, does everyone, is everyone like the whole, we can do this remote? Do we want a hybrid or what does that look like? My hope is that first rounds and those types of things, video interviews, great. People can kind of squeeze it in easier. Things do move faster. There's a lot more candidate engagement. And I think, again, there's more of that speed up that is always helpful. And for, market and competition, I think we get to folks a lot faster versus waiting, 2 weeks just so they can actually be physically in the office. But again, it's change management as it was when we started, and we did a lot of change management on, I hate to say, how do you do a video interview? We did a lot of those, guidebooks as we booked our video interviews for the hiring managers of, and for the candidates, here's how to do a video interview. And, here's how the hiring managers should also do a video interview at the end of the day. So I think we've had 10 months to perfect that process. I'm hoping a lot of those processes stay.
Yeah. I know it's funny, Jerry, the wonderful Jerry is speaking later from Unilever, for any of you guys sticking around for that. There's a question here about how are you driving compliance in the business? And I think connected to how, best practices in when to incorporate, whether that's compliant team, employment law team, or diversity and inclusion experts, or even AI ethicists, right? Which are an emerging topic that are coming in. How do you bring them into the fold, especially as you move from systems of records to, artificial intelligence and next generation toolkits? Anything you can share on that stakeholder management and best practices?
Yeah, and my friend Jerry, she knows she was in all of our conversations when we built a lot of the tech over at Unilever. But I think that's the biggest key, is making sure that whoever you need in those conversations should be at the beginning. So making sure, depending on what you're launching, making sure, legal's involved, compliance is involved, getting their buy-in, and not waiting until you're in a situation where, we just started moving candidates around, or we don't know if a system is accessible to all. So I think it's really making sure, again, it's all about starting at the beginning, getting the right people at that table, or whatever that workshop is to design, or at least making sure that your compliance and your legal teams are looking at new processes or new, we've just gone through it with some of the diversity tools, making sure legal is taking a look at it before we try to institute it. And even for us, as we start, depending on what the product is that we're trying to launch, we are trying to make sure that the right stakeholders from our, not working in a silo, I think is the biggest thing, because you work in that silo, you're going to run into problems, whether legal didn't bless something, compliance didn't bless something, or even sometimes our D&I partners who are so important to us now, making sure when we build these things out, everybody's aligned and we're all working together from the get-go, I think to me has been the biggest lesson learned, because I have been at points that we didn't raise, what is this wording, or, what is this tool? And it launched and it got shut down because we didn't go through all the proper channels, or we didn't get, certain languages looked at. So I think it's really being in tune, again, to whatever your company is, what does that involvement need to be from all those partners, and make sure those partners are kind of getting into the fold right away. And again, it's that backing, because when we go to the business and say, I'm sorry, I have to post your job for 5 days, it is a compliance reason. The HRBPs are saying the same thing, or compliance is saying the same thing. And I think that's another piece too, is because, the business will always say, get it done, let's do it now. And making sure we have the backing, because, they're going to call whoever to say, hey, Melissa told me that I needed to wait 5 days, or I can't have this candidate because my posting says this. And we're ready for that. I think too, we actually just had this conversation about accommodation, ensuring that you have the pieces in place, because when you actually start to dig, you might not have, what one person thinks of accommodation is not really a policy, or it's not really a procedure. Someone truly is coming in that needs some assistance. So I think making sure you're thinking about all of those pieces, and again, not working in that silo, just to ensure that you have all of your stuff covered before you go live.
Yeah. The end-to-end and the domino impact of, you didn't realize this actually triggers that team's concern. I think there's another element that you and I have talked about, which is some vendors build from the most compliant, aware, and turned on, and then it's up to you to switch them down to whatever level you want as an org. Other, usually end-to-end systems, or maybe less specialist in the space of compliant AI, might require your team take a customizable system and make it compliant. So even how you diagnose the vendors you're working with, of how much work and effort do you need from us to make this from an out-of-the-box non-compliant to a customized compliant, versus start with that standard and then have us bring you down. So I guess that lexicon and how that's been part of your job.
Yeah, and again, I think it's having good relationships with your compliance folks, your legal folks, and knowing what their, and I think you said it before, in all the different orgs that I've had highly regulated companies that we can't, it's very strict on what we can and can't do. And I've had other companies that they're a little bit more open and want some flexibility. So again, I think it's really knowing what the end goal is, what the appetite is, even as you're looking at vendors. So to your point, if you have a vendor who's like, we only do this or we can't do this, and it's better that you know right off the bat if that's a deal breaker from a company standpoint, is if they want this but they can't do it. It's part of almost that initial kind of feeling out the vendor phase, because if they can't do things or they can't customize it to the way the org wants it, it's probably not going to be a right fit. And again, you want to know that before you start contracts and you start trying to build, because as soon as they go, oh, we can't do that, and now it's too late, it's obviously a harder thing to explain, when you kind of say, well, this is not possible, but we're kind of locked in at this point.
Yeah, I think, and even making sure in the RFP and in the vetting that you have that Q&A to figure out if you're not able to meet what our compliance or legal team needs, out of the box, then you can make that happen before go live. And what client references can we talk to that have seen that in action, right?
Yeah, and I think that's any part of the RFP. It's compliance, legal, we just went even with a background check vendor, knowing that I don't have a big admin team, so I need you to do more of the heavy lifting when you need to go and chase, W-2s or diplomas and those types of things. So really, what is in your RFP, really making sure you know what your must-haves are, because that'll make your life a lot easier. Because when someone says they can't do it, you can just, hopefully you narrow it down to your top 2 to 3 just by those questions.
Great. So we're going to take some questions from the audience now. If anyone wants to bring them in, we did address one of them from Stacy. I see another question of Melissa. Could you tell us a little bit more about how AI plays a crucial role in your company? I think specifically in the TA HR transformation. I'm sure AbbVie is using artificial intelligence in other areas as well. But maybe you can fill in how the AI or data has addressed challenges that you encountered as the org from an efficiency, effectiveness, or diversity and inclusion standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, I think our whole goal too is, and the AI really is, again, it's never a replacement for TA. I think that's the biggest misnomer, is that all these AI and bots and everything's going to do stuff for us and all the TAs are going to go away. It's just not. I mean, I think even after all this time, again, I think it's more of that mindset of, you still need bodies. There's still a human element to recruitment. There's still, I joke, I said, I can go away someday, maybe start a dating site, because sometimes it's the same thing. So you still have that element of candidate relationship, business relationship. So you always need that human there. What we've done with AI, and really what the goal is for AI for us, is really just efficiency. So making sure, especially on roles that we have just hundreds of resumes coming in and things like that, and especially if you have a higher volume of recs, making it just easier for the recruiters to really be able to comb through resumes, source from one spot. Our goal really is to keep them in one spot so they can do multiple things, whether it's email out or schedule or source or, review resumes all in one spot, and have it minimal that they have to go outside of the system. Probably the only time they're going outside of our systems is into into LinkedIn. I think that's the big thing. And it really is more just ease on the recruiter. It's getting rid of that transactional stuff. As you know, it's really hard to say, oh, I don't want the TAs to be transactional anymore. It is not an option for them not to be transactional if you don't give them the tools. Because if you don't give them the tools, it is post and pray, and it's going through what's there. They have no time for anything else. And that's what our hope is with AI. The more we put into the system, the easier we make it for them to comb through the resumes, source candidates, even sharing back and forth. I want to take them out of email, let them stay in the system and go back and forth with the hiring manager in that system to say yes or no. And people can fill out forms and those types of things in the system. So I think that's really the goal for me at the end of the day, is the tech stack. I don't, hopefully especially with the way everybody is developing. 5 years ago, we might have needed 6 vendors to do every piece of the puzzle. Now you don't, because people are starting to kind of realize, all right, the gaps are in scheduling, or the gaps are in video interviewing. Let me build that into my product. So it's really figuring out, and this is what we've done, is building your foundation. Next step is figuring out what you already have and what it can do, make it, turn on some stuff that maybe you didn't have turned on before. And then from there kind of go, all right, we still have gaps. I'll tell you right now, our gap is we still, we have to figure out the best way to get some of that scheduling automation in. So it's figuring out from there where are your gaps, and then, kind of building it and then starting to look at your vendors from there. But I think we've gone through, we don't need the 25 vendors in a stack just to do every piece, which has been really good.
Yeah, I think, in Melissa, that recognition for some steps, you want a specialist or a best in breed. For other things, the generic, and maybe that connects to compliance considerations or accuracy, or if you're going from manual human to relying on an AI, then that risk profile of it being, not that highest tier quality, I guess. Maybe you can add that in as well, and how you think about that matrix.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that's a lot of things, in certain areas where you're constantly having we think of all of, especially for us, sales positions and those types of things, you're getting hundreds and thousands of resumes. So making sure it's, again, it's fair, it's and accessible to all, but it's easy for the recruiter to kind of comb through and get to that small bunch of folks and again, how do you share too? Because I know, again, coming back from, there was no way to kind of say, oh, everybody was keeping their candidates on spreadsheets. We all know everyone forgot about those candidates, or the recruiter left, and all those second and third runners up were gone with that recruiter. So that's another area too, is like, how do you make sure the team is really kind of connected? So especially in those hard to fill roles, if somebody sees somebody great, that person can take their runner up and just shoot it on over to me. So we don't lose those people either.
Yeah. Melissa, it's been such a pleasure as always. We hear from you for decades and many, many hours. Just in closing, I guess a non-obvious piece of advice to those implementing these transformations, or championing and being that friction point between the business goals and the tactical forest that the end users still live in, and that shift. Any kind of closing advice you'd have to those listening in that wouldn't be the most obvious thing to go to?
Yeah, I think the big thing is don't try to do it all in one shot. And I think I said this before, is doing it in waves, figuring out kind of what is the best way to implement, and not trying to kind of do everything all at once and shove everything into a chain. It's a change. It is an evolving change that needs some time. So I think that's my biggest advice to everybody is, I know we want everything fixed and beautiful and wonderful within, a month or two, but I think really is be realistic when you start planning these things out. Don't try to change, especially if you're in a global organization, don't try to change the whole globe in one shot with a whole bunch of new technologies or new processors and things like that. I think that's the biggest lessons learned that I have. And it's really figuring out where the best appetites are, get them going, let them prove of why it's good. And then once you make your case, you can easily start expanding. And don't be afraid to pivot at any point in time, because we all know the way we think it's going to work and the way that it's built might not always match. So just, I think it's keep an open mind, and be able to be flexible and pivot, and make sure you have vendors that will pivot with you, because if that's, I think choosing good partners is also another big key task that you have to have a really good, successful kind of build out at the end of the day.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for joining us. It's been enlightening, always for me, and I think for the audience. Melissa, if anyone listening in wants to get in touch with you, LinkedIn, kind of what?
Yep, LinkedIn is always the best. Feel free to connect with me. And thank you again for inviting me to do this. Always fun.
Likewise. So thank you to the TA Tech team, and looking forward to the rest of this great agenda and day.
Thank you.